Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. In this video, I'm going to be doing one of the last big jobs that I have left with my bus conversion, and that is to install the diesel heater. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I'm putting a diesel heater in the bus and which one I chose to install, and then I'm going to show you how I do it. So when it comes to heating up your bus or your caravan or your camper van, there's a few different options. The three main ones are electric heaters, gas heaters, and then there's diesel heaters. Just recently I posted a video showing how I installed my underbunk air conditioner, and that air conditioner is actually a reverse cycle unit, so it can heat as well as cool. So if I wanted to, I could just use that electric air conditioner to heat the bus up in winter. The problem with that is that electric heaters use a lot of power, and that may be fine if you spend a lot of your time plugged in at campgrounds or caravan parks where you have access to shore power most of the time. Then electric heaters would probably be perfectly suited for that. I wanted to set up my bus so that I could be mostly off-grid. I don't have a lot of money to be staying in expensive caravan parks every night. And I also prefer to be sort of more in nature and away from other people. So my goal with this bus is to be able to camp off-grid for as long as possible. So I didn't really want to be relying solely on electrical to heat the bus in winter. I also didn't want to have any gas in the bus. My personal feeling is that gas is just not safe, especially in a moving vehicle. There's too much potential for leaks, and so I made the decision not to install any gas appliances in my bus. So the best alternative for me was to install a diesel heater. So diesel heaters have been around for a long time. Lots and lots of people have them installed in their RVs. They're safe, they work really well, so they're very efficient little heaters. Quite compact in size, so they don't take up as much space as some other type of heaters. You don't need any special certification. If you're installing a gas heater in your bus, it needs to be done by a licensed technician, and it all has to be signed off and certified to be compliant. You don't need to worry about any of that with a diesel heater. Diesel heaters are also very fuel efficient, so they only use a very small amount of diesel, so the overall running cost is cheaper than something like a gas heater. The other benefit to a diesel heater is that because all of the intake and the exhaust from the combustion is vented outside the bus, you don't get that buildup of condensation like you do with some other sorts of heaters, particularly gas heaters. Condensation's already a big issue when you're living inside a vehicle, and gas heaters in particular can create quite a bit of moisture, which can actually worsen the condensation problem. Diesel heaters produce a dry heat, so they can actually help to reduce the levels of condensation inside your bus, which is a good thing. And the other benefit for me with having a diesel heater was my bus is a diesel bus, so I don't actually need to carry any extra fuel. I can just hook up the diesel heater straight into the main fuel system of the bus. Now, if you start looking into diesel heaters, you will see that there is a huge range available, from cheap Chinese-made diesel heaters that you can buy on eBay for a couple of $100, all the way up to the more expensive brands like Webasto and Eberspächer that can cost in the thousands. So it really just comes down to what your budget is and what your personal preferences are in terms of the sort of diesel heater that you want to put in. There's a lot of people that have just bought really cheap Chinese diesel heaters on eBay and installed them in their vans, and they work really well. A lot of them don't come with particularly good instructions, but there's a lot of videos on YouTube with people showing how they install their Chinese diesel heaters. The problem is that to a certain extent you get what you pay for. A lot of them are just simply not as good quality as some of the more expensive name brands. So the materials are used in their construction are not as great, and in a lot of cases they just don't last as long, so the parts wear out a lot quicker. They need servicing a lot earlier than some of the more expensive brands. If there's a malfunction of some kind, it can be really hard to figure out what's wrong, and then it can be extremely difficult to get support and find people to repair those kinds of heaters. So they're just some things to keep in mind if you're looking at getting one of the cheap Chinese heaters. Personally, I believe in doing things once and doing them right the first time from the beginning, because I think that in the long run it saves you time, it saves you money, and it saves you a lot of stress doing it that way. And I would rather save up for a little bit longer to buy something that's good quality than to buy something cheap and then have to spend time and money fixing issues and replacing bits on it. I wanted something that I just knew would work straight out of the box, that was going to be really well made, that was going to be safe and not have any dodgy parts. I wanted something that was going to last a decent amount of time before it required any servicing or replacement of parts. I wanted something that was covered by a good warranty, and I wanted something that was easy to control. I wanted to be able to set a temperature. I wanted to be able to set a timer so that if I wanted to have the diesel heater on when I went to bed at night, I could set it to turn off after a certain number of hours so it wasn't running all night. And so for those reasons, I ended up going with a more expensive brand. In fact, I probably went for the most expensive brand on the market. I paid $2,000 for mine. So the diesel heater that I chose to go with for my bus was the Eberspächer. The Eberspächer diesel heaters are designed in Germany. They're built with really high quality parts, and I don't know anyone that's ever had any issues with them when they've installed them in their RV. I bought my heater online from caravanrvcamping.com.au. It's an Australian website. They have heaps of stuff for caravans and RVs, and I've actually teamed up with them to give you guys a special discount. So stay tuned to the end of this video and I'll give you all the details about that. But right now, I think I've done enough talking. It's time to install this heater. So this is how it comes in the box. Now, the first thing I noticed that I love about this is that everything comes packaged in sections and every part is numbered, which I think is going to make it really easy when it comes to install. You've got all your warranty information, operating instructions and so on. The one annoying thing with this kit is that the installation instructions actually come on a CD, which is not very useful for me because my Mac actually doesn't have a CD drive. But you can easily find the installation instructions online. So what I did was I actually downloaded the PDF and just printed it off. So I made up my own book. So I've got all the installation instructions there. And that's just a lot more user-friendly for me. I'm a bit old school. I like to actually read things on paper and have that so I can carry it with me and have it next to where I'm working. So yeah, definitely recommend doing that. Easy to download the PDF online and print off your own little instruction manual. So in the box, everything is really well labeled. So for instance, in this pack here, you've got all the gear for the exhaust side of the system. So you've got your exhaust pipe, there's a muffler in there, all the fittings that come that you need to install the exhaust piping, and they're all labeled so that you know, each part is numbered so that when you go to read the instructions, you know exactly which part goes where, which I think is going to be a big help because there are a lot of pieces here and it looks a little bit daunting for a first time installer. Here we've got all the electrical cables. So the other good thing about the Eberspächer is that it comes with all the cabling that you need. It's basically a plug and play system. And again, all the cables are numbered so you know which ones go where. So that's all the electrical. In this pack here, we've got all the stuff that you need for the fuel system. So there's the fuel line, the little rubber mount for the fuel pump, and all the other little fittings that you need to hook that up. Here we've got the outlet vents and the duct outlets that you need to go inside the bus. And it comes with some ducting. I think there's about 2 meters of ducting that actually comes free with this kit, but you can purchase more if you need it. And this here is the mounting plate that goes onto the floor, and the diesel heater bolts down onto that, and your exhaust and everything comes through the floor through there. And then this is the little controller that you can use to set the temperature and so on and actually control the diesel heater. It's a little wall mounted unit. And then this is the diesel heater itself. So you can see that's the diesel heater there. That's it. As you can see, it's a pretty compact little unit. It doesn't take up a lot of space inside the bus, and it's reasonably lightweight. I mean, it probably only weighs 2 or 3 kilos, I'm guessing, maybe not even that much. So yeah, it's a nice compact little unit. And also in this box is the fuel pump. as well. So got all the little bits and pieces here. As I said, there are a lot of pieces and it's a little bit daunting at first. But the instructions look pretty detailed, and as I said, every part is numbered, so I'm hoping it'll be a relatively easy install. We'll find out. So this is where I'm planning to install the diesel heater. This is a section underneath one of the kitchen cabinets in my bus, and this is where I installed my air conditioner. So if you saw that video, you would have seen how I did that. And you'll know from that video that underneath here is the only section of the bus that I have left that has free space underneath the floor, where there's no water tanks or anything else important underneath the bus. There's plenty of room for exhaust pipes and things to come through the floor here. So this is pretty much the only suitable space I have left. Now I've complicated things a little bit by putting in the air conditioner, because originally I had this whole floor space at the bottom of the cabinet free, and I was going to install the diesel heater this way. There would have been plenty of room for that. But then I decided to put the air conditioner in, which I'm very glad that I did. But it just means that now I only have this little space at the front of the cabinet here. But I think it'll be enough. I think there's just enough space there. So this is the mounting plate that needs to go on the floor, and that's the size of the hole that I need to cut in the floor. And there's just enough room for that to go in front of the air conditioner there. Now this cabinet is actually, I have to put a front on this cabinet yet. It'll come out another 30 mil beyond where it does at the moment. So there will actually be a little bit more room at the front here when this cabinet is finished. So there's just enough room for that, and the diesel heater will sit kind of, obviously it'll be sitting flush on the floor, but that's kind of where it will be. So this gives me enough clearance here for the air intake, and then this end here is where the ducting will come out. It's tight. And there'll have to be like a fairly tight bend in the ducting, but it does bend that much, so I think it'll be okay. Hopefully if I can cut this hole in the right spot, there'll be just enough room for that diesel heater in there. The only other place I could fit this heater is actually under the bed here. If I take this front off, I can show you I have some space on the floor there, and I could fit the diesel heater in there. There is room to cut the hole in this area here, but it would mean that I'd have to sacrifice quite a bit of space in there that I actually need for storing my paper and other materials for my business. So I don't really want to do that. This area here is the best option for me, so hopefully I can make it fit. Alright, so I'm under the bus here. That's my rear wheels on the driver's side, so I'm just in front of the rear wheels, and you can see here is where all of the holes are for the aircon that I installed. So I've got a couple of large holes here and then a couple of drainage ports. So the aircon is basically sitting here. And so if I put the diesel heater right in front of that, it's going to mean that the hole I need to cut is kind of around here somewhere. Now, it looks like this chassis rail's in the way, but it's actually not, because there's at least 150 mil between the top of this chassis rail and the floor. So there's plenty of clearance to be able to drill the hole and bring the piping out. It's just going to be a little bit awkward working around it to connect everything up. But the hole's basically going to be, I think, here somewhere. So you can see there's plenty of room. It's not going to hit anything mechanically important. There's no cables or anything under here that I need to worry about. I should be able to run the exhaust pipe straight down here and out with the main vehicle exhaust. And the intake pipe, I think I'll be able to route this way away from the exhaust. And I'm thinking the fuel pump, I'll be able to attach it either to this chassis rail or perhaps even to this one. There's a few options. So there's plenty of room to work with under here. So what I'm going to do is go up into the bus, mark where the hole needs to be cut for the heater mount, and then I'll drill some pilot holes just to make sure that the position's okay and I'm not going to hit anything else under here. It doesn't look like I will. You know what they say, measure twice, cut once. So just to double check everything before I go cutting the really big hole. All right, so I've got the diesel heater sitting where I want it to be in this cabinet. Now, this is the intake end, so the heater's going to draw fresh air in this way and blow the hot air out this way. And you need a minimum of 30 millimeters clearance from the intake end to any walls. So this is 30 mil wide, this piece of timber. So I've got the minimum clearance there from this stud. But over here you can see there's actually a gap there, and this will be open. So the inside of the cabinet will actually be open to the underneath of the bed. Now I'll probably have some stuff stored here, but this is 20 mil thick, this stud. So it's actually going to have like at least 50 mil clearance between this and whatever's stored in here. Plus it's got all this air around it. So I think that'll be fine. But in any case, I'm meeting the minimum 30 mil clearance required here. And I think, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a reasonable gap. There's about 40 mil between where the heater will sit and the side of the aircon, which is actually made from like an insulating material anyway. And then I've drawn a line on the floor here. This is where the front of the cabinet will come to when I finish building it. So there's about 40 mil clearance again between the front of the cabinet and the heater. So hopefully that'll be okay. That's the best I can do to fit it in. Hopefully I'll have just enough room at this end to get the ducting around and out the front of the cabinet here. So I'm going to go ahead now and mark on the floor around this circle, which is the hole that I have to cut so the mounting plate can sit down into the floor. So I'll mark that, and then I'll drill some pilot holes and just double check underneath before I go and cut this hole. All right, so I've got my circle marked out and I've drilled 4 little pilot holes marking the border of where that circle is. So we'll just go under the bus now and see where it is. All right, so I'm back under the bus and you can see, well, hopefully you can see it on the camera. There's my 4 pilot holes there. So the circle that I'm going to have to cut is going to be here. So it's not anywhere near that chassis rail, which is good. See if I can see it from this side. You can just see one of the pilot holes here. So it's going to be sitting kind of above where this chassis rail is and a little bit further in towards the center of the bus. I'm going to go ahead now and cut out this hole. Well, I just cut the hole out and I was intending to film it, but I realized after I'd finished cutting that the camera wasn't actually recording. I tried to do it with the jigsaw because I don't have a hole saw big enough. It was a bit awkward getting the jigsaw in it. I didn't really quite fit up against the aircon here, so it's very rough. I should be able to clean up those edges just with a file and get them looking a little bit neat. It's the worst circle I think I've ever cut. Beautiful. All right, so that is sitting nice and tight now in that hole and flush with the floor, so I'm happy with that. All right, so before I go and secure this mounting plate down into the floor, I think what I'm going to do is actually attach the pipes and things onto here, and then I can pass them down through the hole, just because it's going to be quite awkward to get them all fastened on, and it's going to be even more awkward trying to do it upside down around that chassis rail underneath the bus. So there's 2 pipes that need to be secured onto the diesel heater from underneath here. And one of them is the air intake pipe and the other is the exhaust pipe. And you can tell which is which because if you look at the 2 connections here, you can see, so these 4 bolts here are just for mounting the diesel heater down onto the plate. And then you can see this extra little connection here, that is for the fuel line. And if you look at the instructions here, the intake So number one is the combustion air hose. So this is the intake hose, and it goes into the one that's closest to where the fuel line comes in. So the intake hose goes onto this one, and then the exhaust pipe connects to this one. So these are all the pieces that you need for the combustion part of the diesel heater setup. So you've got your flexible intake hose here and a little hose clip to secure that on. You've got two pieces of exhaust pipe here. So this is stainless steel exhaust. There's a longer piece here and a shorter piece, and then there's a little exhaust muffler, and then you've got some hose clips and some brackets and things to attach the exhaust underneath the bus. Now this length of intake hose is probably all right for what I need, but I don't think I'm going to need anywhere near this much length for the exhaust pipe because the diesel heater is located just above where my vehicle exhaust comes out, and that's where I want to route this exhaust to. So I don't think I'm going to need all of this, which means I'm going to probably have to cut this pipe. So what I'll have to do before I hook it up to this is I will have to just sit this down into the hole, get under the bus, and just get a sense of how much of this I'm going to need, exactly where it's going to be routed, and then I'll be able to cut it to the right length before I hook it up to this. The other thing to note is when you're putting on the exhaust pipe that it comes in two sections. So you've got a longer piece here and a shorter piece, and the important thing to note is that the length of the exhaust pipe coming from the diesel heater to the muffler needs to be longer than the piece that, like the end piece that comes from the muffler. So you need to use the long piece for this section here, and then the shorter end piece comes after the muffler. So the two pipes that I need to connect up to this end of the heater is this longer exhaust pipe here and this flexible intake hose. I'll tell you what, I am really glad I decided to do this bit first, because it would have been near impossible trying to do this upside down under the bus. It's just such a tight little space. It's super awkward to get spanners and things in to tighten up the clamps. Luckily my dad had this little mini socket set which took up a lot less space than my normal size one, but even so there was only just enough room to get it in. I definitely recommend spending a little bit of time working out where you're going to fit all the different hose clamps and making sure you've got enough space to fit the ratchet in before you go tightening them all up. Alright, so now I've got the fuel line. So it comes with this little adapter. It's just like a little piece of rubber hose. There's like a wider hole at one end and a more narrow hole at the other end. So I've pushed the fuel line into the narrow hole, and now this bigger hole is what goes over the fuel inlet connection here. So if I push that on all the way in, and the fuel hose is in as far as I can get it. Two little hose clamps to secure that in place. So now I've got the air inlet and the fuel line connected. Now I've just got to connect up the exhaust. Right, so I've got my exhaust cut to the right length, hopefully. Alright, I think I've got them all secured on there tightly enough. That's as good as I can get anyway. It's so awkward to get in there. So I think now I can go ahead and secure this mounting plate down onto the floor, and then I can do the rest of the stuff underneath the bus. Oh, that's a problem. There's a broken bit of screw in there. Or I can try and back off on this a little bit. Okay, let's take this out. And just angle it a little bit so that it's away from those holes. Okay, that's in. So yesterday I managed to get the exhaust piping and the intake hose for the combustion side of the heater all secured underneath the bus. I didn't actually film the process of doing that, sorry, because it was just super awkward to try and do it in the limited space that I had, and there was no way I was going to be able to get the camera in to be able to capture it properly. But I'll just take you onto the bus now and I'll show you what I got done. All right, so you can see this is where the heater comes out through the floor. I've got the air intake hose running down this way and pointing back. So it's pointing down and also sort of pointing back towards the back of the bus so that it's not getting air and dust and things sucked into it as I'm driving. I've just got it zip tied to the chassis there. And then the exhaust pipe comes down here around this chassis beam and goes to the outside of the bus along with the main vehicle exhaust. And if I just come over this way, oh, sorry, it's really awkward trying to film under here. I could have attached the muffler directly to this chassis beam here, but that would mean that it was quite a way further back here, and the piece of exhaust pipe coming from the heater down to the muffler would have been shorter than the end piece. And remember, it's important to have this initial piece of exhaust pipe coming from the heater to the muffler. This needs to be longer than the end piece that comes after the muffler. So what I did was I just attached this steel bracket here, so it's screwed into the chassis beam, and I've bolted the muffler onto that, so it just brings the muffler further out this way. So there wasn't really anything out here to attach it to, but that's pretty strong. Time will tell how well that holds up when the bus has been driving over dirt roads and stuff, but at the moment it seems pretty secure. And I've just secured the end of the diesel heater exhaust to the main vehicle exhaust with a stainless steel hose clamp. So hopefully that will be okay. So the next job I need to do is to mount the fuel pump under here. So there's a couple of things to know when you're mounting the fuel pump. In terms of the flow of fuel, you'll see on this particular one, this got the port here for the electrical connection to go in there. This is the intake end. So this is the line, this is the end that gets connected to your fuel tank or the fuel line of the bus. Fuel comes in this way and is pumped out this way to the diesel heater. And you won't be able to see it on the camera, but there's actually a little arrow on this socket here that tells you which direction the fuel needs to pump. So just make sure you get that aligned correctly so that your fuel is pumping in the right direction. And the other important thing is the angle at which the pump gets mounted. Now it needs to be on a slight increase up towards the heater, and that incline needs to be ideally within 15 to 35 degrees. So you can't mount it straight. You can't mount it pointing downwards towards the heater. It's got to be pointing up. Now, it can actually be anywhere between 15 degrees and 90 degrees, but the ideal is between 15 and 35. So that's where I'm going to try and mount it. So it comes with this little bracket that attaches to the chassis or whatever you're mounting it to underneath the bus. And onto that gets mounted this special rubber mount. So the pump goes through this rubber mount, and then that gets bolted on to the bracket that gets attached underneath the bus. And the idea with the rubber mount is it provides a bit of cushioning, helps to absorb some of the vibration when the pump is working, and therefore helps to reduce the noise. So it's like a little silencer. So I've decided to mount the pump on this center bit of the chassis rather than this one over here, just because I was a bit worried about it being too close to the vehicle exhaust there. So I'm going to mount it over here, and you can see I've marked 15-degree incline and 35-degree incline. So ideally you want the pump to be mounted so that it's pointing in this range here. It can be a little bit above that, but it can't be any lower than 15. So when the pump gets mounted, it's got to be kind of on sort of that angle. Can be a little bit more than that, but it can't be less than that 15 degrees. So ideally sort of pointing up that way. So I'm going to go ahead, try and drill a hole, pilot hole in there, and get the bracket mounted on. All right, so I'm going to push this pump into the rubber mount. Which is not as easy as it looks. Okay, I hope that's on far enough. That's as far as I can push it this way because of the socket that's in the way. So I hope that's all right. So now this is the end that'll get connected to the fuel line coming from the diesel heater, so I'll need to do that underneath the bus because I've already got the other end of the fuel line joined onto the heater, but I can hook this end up. So I've got extra piece of fuel line here, and this is the line that'll be connected to the main fuel system in the bus. So I'm going to go and hook that up here now because it's one less thing I need to do under the bus, and then this other end I'll have to do when I get back under there. Before I push it in, I'm just going to make a mark on the fuel pipe here, just so I know as I'm pushing it in that it's actually gone in far enough. So you can see it's got to go in until it hits that connection there. So I'm just going to put a mark on that. Yay. Now, I have to tell you, it is really hard to get these fuel lines into the little rubber hoses. It's a very tight fit, and I had to use a lot of force to get them in. It helps if you smear a little bit of petroleum jelly onto the fuel line before pushing it in and sort of twist the hose as you're going. But even so, I struggled with this bit and ended up with very sore hands with blisters on my fingers from trying to get it in. If any of you guys know a trick to getting these fuel lines into the hoses, please let me know in the comments below because I'm sure it'll help someone else who's wanting to do this in the future. Alright, so that's the fuel pump mounted. I've got the fuel pump at the correct angle, but I'm not really happy with this bit of the pipe. It's kind of sagging a bit there. I could maybe fix it by pulling this out, chopping a little bit more off it so it's sort of pulled a bit tighter. But honestly, it was so hard to get it on there. I'm not really keen to do that. I'm just going to leave it for now, and hopefully that will work. If not, I'll obviously have to pull it apart and fix that, but hopefully that will do the job. The next part of the installation is to get all the wiring connected. So the instruction manual has some pretty serious, complicated looking wiring diagrams for everything. But I don't think I'm going to have to worry too much about those because all of the cabling is supplied and it's pretty much just plug and play. You can figure out what goes where. Like, I'm just going to refer to this diagram here and you can kind of figure out what goes where because the plugs only fit, one way. So these are all the cables that come supplied with the heater. This here is the main cable harness, so this big plug here connects to the heater itself and then everything else kind of connects onto that. So this one here is the main power cable from the battery. So this these wires here will hook up to the main 12-volt supply in my bus, and then this plugs into this one here on the main harness. This cable here is for the fuel pump, so I need to connect these bits here up to this, and then that will plug into this one here, and then the other end of this cable plugs in underneath the bus where the fuel pump is. And then this cable here is for the controller unit that sets the temperature and everything. So it will plug into here and it'll run to the wall mounted unit and plug into that one. So I'm hoping the connections will be reasonably straightforward. The challenging bit with this will be figuring out where to run the cables. I'm going to have to run them under the bus. Battery bank and everything is at the back of the bus here. The diesel heater is sort of more towards the front on the opposite side. And if I want to run the cables totally inside the bus, I'd have to go out through the cabinets here, along the back, and through the ceiling here, down behind the fridge and under the cabinet here. And that total run would be too long for the size cable that's supplied here. This looks like it's 4mm square cable, which is fine as long as I keep the total run length in less than about 5 meters. So in order to do that, I'm going to come down through this cabinet here, down through the floor, and run them underneath the bus across to the other side. Alright guys, well, I've hooked up all the wiring. As far as I can tell, I've got everything plugged in correctly. I'll just show you what I've got done. Alright, so this cable at the back here is the one for the diesel heater. So you can see I've got it hooked up to the positive and negative of the fuse block here. I've got a 20 amp fuse, which will go in there. The heater comes with its own 20 amp inline fuse, which is actually part of the main cable harness that's plugged in closer to the heater, but it won't hurt to have an extra one here. Now on this particular fuse block, each of the circuits is capable of tolerating up to 30 amps, and the diesel heater specs say that the heater will pull about 7.5 amps on startup, so this fuse block is more than capable of handling that. And so from here, the cable runs down inside, down the back of the wall there. You can see it running at the back of the pantry cabinet. It runs all the way along the back of this cabinet here, and you can see it coming down there and going down through the floor. And then it runs under the bus here and over to where it comes out of the floor here near the diesel heater. And you can see I'm under the bus here. That's where it comes down through the floor, just in front of where the starter batteries are, and it runs along here through that chassis beam there, across to the other side and up through the floor just near where the diesel heater is. The other cable coming down through the floor is this one here. I don't know if you can see it very well. It's looping around and connecting into the fuel pump. And so the cables come up through the floor here and plug into the main cable harness that I've just got secured to the wall behind the diesel heater. And the cable for the control unit comes up through there, runs under the bed here just above where I've got all the air conditioner ducts, and goes into the cabinet and up inside this wall to the little control unit that I've mounted. Not sure if I open this cabinet here. It's a little bit hard to see, but that's where the cable's going up from the bed through the wall here and into the little control unit. And as you can see, I've done the bottom of the cabinet front here. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. So there's the diesel heater down inside the cabinet there, and the ducting comes out through the front of the cabinet. All right guys, it's the moment of truth. Time to test whether it actually works. So at the moment I've just got the fuel line running into my diesel that's in the jerry can here. Just hopefully that'll be enough just to test whether the heater actually works. All right, so this symbol here with the 3 wiggly arrows is heating. So I think that means that it's currently off. So if I select that, so this is where I can set the temperature. So if I crank it up to say 30 degrees, set that. Smallest amount of time I can have it on for is 10 minutes. I think if I set it to that infinity, it'll just stay on until I turn it off. Let's set it to that. All right, so I did just hear a little click behind me where the diesel heater is, but I can't hear any fan or any pump at the moment. I don't know if you can hear that, but I can hear the fuel pump ticking underneath the bus. And I can hear the fan starting on the diesel heater inside here. At the moment it's blowing cool air out here. I'm guessing it's going to take a little bit to heat up. And this is what it sounds like inside the bus. I can't hear the fuel pump ticking at all inside the bus. I'm still not getting particularly warm air coming out of there though. Okay, and now I'm getting an error that says there's an issue with the fuel supply or the fuel pump. All right, guys, well, I've been onto the bus and I've had a look at the fuel pump. It all looks okay as far as I can tell on the outside. I couldn't see any evidence of any leaks. The connections all seem pretty solid. I think what might be the issue is that the fuel line is just too long. Like at the moment I'm using the full length piece that came with the diesel heater. I think it's about 6 meters long and there's a lot of coils in it before it gets into the jerry can, and I think maybe the pump's just having trouble pumping it out of there. So what I've done is I've just cut the fuel line to make it shorter. I think I've still got more than enough for the mechanic to hook it up where he's got it under the bus, but I think it was just, there was too much length. Like this is the length that I cut off it, and it was just too much length and too many coils for the pump to pump properly is what I'm hoping. So I've just cut it off and so made this a bit shorter and a bit straighter to the fuel pump, and we'll give it another go and hopefully it'll work this time. Right, so let's try this again. And we'll see what happens. So you probably didn't hear that on the camera, but I just heard a little sort of a clunk or a click on near the heater here. I'll just come down underneath the bus. It takes a minute or two, I think, for things to start up once you turn it on. There we go, you can hear the pump ticking now. And then you can hear the fan starting up, you can hear that air coming out of the exhaust. Hear it really cranking up now, so I'm going to go inside the bus again. Not getting any error flashing. Oh yeah, and that you can feel hot air coming out of that vent now. Excellent. So I'd say that was the only issue. The fuel pump was just having a hard time pumping up such a long curly line from the jerry can. So the fan's really kicking in now. That fan is actually quite loud at the moment. I think that's because I've got the temperature cranked up to 30 degrees, which I wouldn't normally do. I probably only set it for I don't know, 20, 23, something like that. The temperature sensor is actually inside this control unit here. So it's this control that's measuring the ambient temperature, and so it's controlling the heater based on what temperature it's reading up here. So it's going to take a while for the hot air to sort of circulate through the bus and get back to the control unit. What I might do is just try turning the temperature down. So we'll just turn the temperature and we'll set it on, maybe we'll say 21 degrees. And you can hear already the fan starting to slow down and get a lot quieter. I've still got hot air coming out there, but that's much quieter now. All right, so I'm really happy with that. Looks like it's all working as it should. I'm going to turn it off now. And the important thing with these diesel heaters is that you don't shut them off suddenly. They need time to gradually like cool down. So on this particular one, just holding the button in for a couple of seconds will turn it off. But you'll hear that the fan is still running. And there it goes. So that was about, I would say, 3 minutes it ran for after I turned it off until it shut down. Well, that's it, guys. Looks like it's all working really well. And the only issue I had with starting it was when I had that fuel line a bit too long to begin with. So if I didn't have that issue, it would have just started first time. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to get an Eberspächer, because you just know it's going to work straight out of the box. So I'm really happy that I seem to have hooked up everything correctly. Now I'm going to get my mechanic to hook that fuel line up into the return fuel line of the bus. So it will actually then be drawing fuel from the main fuel tank. So I won't have to carry a separate fuel tank for the diesel heater, which will be good. So I'm going to get him to do that. I've got the bus booked in to have that done in a couple of weeks' time. This little test has gone pretty well today. I'm happy that the diesel heater is installed and it's all working well. And I'm looking forward to being nice and toasty here in the winter. Now, I did mention at the very beginning of this video that I've teamed up with Caravan RV Camping to give you guys a special discount. So if you have a look in the description below this video, I'll put a link to the Caravan RV Camping website and the discount code that you can use at checkout. So if you use my discount code, you can get 20 bucks off your order. It doesn't have to be on a diesel heater, could be anything on their website at all. So it's just one way of me saying thank you to you guys for watching all my videos and being here to support me. Thanks to Caravan RV Camping for giving us that discount code as well. You guys rock. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found this helpful. If you got any questions, please leave them down in the comments below and I'll try and respond to as many as I can. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.